Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sleepy Survival. Tonight we're stepping into a world that never really slept. A place where light, sound and motion ran long after the sun went down. You're standing on the edge of a 19th century mill town, chimneys rising through the dusk, river water thick with reflection. In a moment you'll cross that bridge, and the night will begin. Inside, machines breathe where people should. Threads move faster than thought, and the air itself hums like a living thing. But you'll get used to it. Everyone does. You arrive with the others just as the light begins to fade. A tired, colorless dusk that barely separates the sky from the smoke of the town. The mill sits on the far side of the river, its tall brick walls already absorbing the last of the day. A single bell rings overhead. 3 heavy notes, slow and deliberate, and the air shivers with it. You've heard it so many times that your body answers before your mind does. Feet move. Shoulders rise. You fall into line. The dirt path has turned to packed mud after the afternoon drizzle, and you step around the deep boot prints filled with water. The canal glints beside you, dull and pewter. Ahead, one of the overseers stands by the open doorway, the lamplight behind him outlining his shape in amber and soot. You nod, or maybe you don't. It makes no difference. Inside, the air will already be warm with oil and lint and the soft mechanical breath of the looms. You step through the door. The sound folds around you. Not loud exactly, but constant. Thread sliding, belts turning, wooden frames groaning like a sleeping animal. The mill never truly rests. Its heart beats on a different rhythm than daylight. And you are here to survive the night. Before we begin, take a slow breath. If you enjoy falling asleep to slow histories like this, you can gently tap like or subscribe. Only if you truly enjoy it. And tell me quietly where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, back to the mill. The floor under your boots feels alive. You can feel the vibration of every machine humming through the planks, up your legs, into your spine. A line of girls, some hardly 14, are already seated at their frames, tying the ends of new spools. Their fingers move without looking. Beside them, a boy empties a basket of raw cotton onto the table, each handful puffing into the air like ghosts. Someone lights another oil lamp, and the glow trembles across the room. For a second you see the walls faded blue plaster, streaked with soot where the air vents leak. Pulleys and belts hang overhead, like the veins of a body. The smell is a mix of oil, damp wool, and the faint sweetness of soap someone used on their hands hours ago. A clock hangs above the door. The hands read 6:45. The night shift begins at 7. You take your place. Work begins. The overseer passes by with his lantern, marking faces. One nod from him, and the wheels begin to turn. The noise rises slowly, as if the building itself is waking up. Belts catch, flywheels spin, the air thickens with motion. You tie the end of a new thread and begin the pattern. Back and forth, back and forth. Each pass of the shuttle leaves behind a soft sigh of cotton dust. You've done this so many nights that you can tell time by the rhythm of your own arms. You know how the temperature changes. Cooler for the first 2 hours, then heat rising as the machines exhale. You know the way your fingertips grow numb just before the break, when you can't feel the difference between thread and skin. Outside the windows, the sky turns the color of iron. The world beyond fades until only the inside remains. This warm, breathing box of labor. A woman near you hums to herself, almost soundless under the machines. Her voice rises once every few minutes, like a memory trying to surface. No one speaks loudly here. The noise eats every word. Every so often, the overseer walks the aisle. He carries a long stick with a hook on the end, used to reach jammed threads or to tap someone awake. You've never fallen asleep on the frame, but you've seen others nod forward and wake with a bruise where the shuttle struck. The lamps flicker. Shadows wobble on the walls. The light makes halos in the oil-soaked air. You catch yourself imagining what the town looks like right now. The quiet cottages, the bakery shuttered, a dog curled beneath a step. Somewhere, a church bell tolls 8. You think it has only just begun. The boy with the basket runs past again, barefoot. His small feet slap the boards. He can't be more than 12, though he moves with the weary certainty of a grown man. He stops beside the boiler door, shoves it open, and disappears inside. A red glow spills out for a moment, then vanishes as the door closes again. Heat blooms along the wall. You wipe your forehead with the edge of your sleeve, leaving a smear of dust that will dry into grey later. At 9, the first accident happens. A loom near the back stops short with a grinding noise. A thread snapped and caught in the wheel. Everyone freezes for half a breath. Then the overseer strides over, muttering. The girl who worked that frame stands aside, hands trembling. He clears the jam, restarts the belt, and the rhythm resumes, as if the pause had been an illusion. You glance at the girl. Her face is blank, but her eyes are wet. A fine cut runs across one knuckle. She presses it to her apron and goes back to work. In a few minutes you forget it happened. The mind learns to drift, to separate the motion of the body from thought. You focus on patterns, on breath, on survival. Hours blur. The only thing that marks them is the clock on the far wall, its face shining faintly in the lamplight. The hands crawl toward 12. You've lost track of how many spools you've finished. Each one looks the same, perfect, white, endless. The overseer yawns when he passes now. His lantern flame has shrunk to a thin thread. There's a half-hour rest near midnight. You sit on a crate with 2 others, sharing a piece of bread. The crust tastes of oil and dust. Someone says it's snowing outside. You think of that, flakes landing on the black water of the canal, melting instantly, and realize you haven't seen real weather in months. You stretch your hands. The joints pop softly, like tapping on wood. The girl from before is asleep, sitting up, head against the wall, hands still in her lap. When the bell rings again, she startles and stands. Everyone does. The room returns to motion like a body regaining breath. From here onward, time thickens. The machines seem louder, the air heavier. Lint settles on your eyelashes. You blink slowly, trying not to rub your eyes because the threads on your sleeves are too coarse. The foreman lights a new lamp. Its glow falls on the clock. 12:30. The mill feels smaller now, walls closing in with heat. You watch the same pulley wheel for several minutes, hypnotized by its perfect rotation. At the far end, a young man leans against a beam, hand to his temple. The overseer notices and starts toward him, but the man straightens before he arrives. You can see the sweat dripping off his chin, landing in the cotton like rain. You tell yourself you'll rest after the next spool, after the next turn, after the next something. But next never arrives here. The child runner reappears, face streaked with soot, carrying a bucket of water. He offers it to you, and you drink from the rim. The taste is metallic. You thank him, though he can't hear. The overseer nods once, approval or exhaustion. You can't tell. You look up. The lamps along the ceiling sway gently in the heat currents. Their glass chimneys are black at the tips. The air smells faintly of burnt oil now. Every sense begins to flatten. You stop noticing color, sound, smell. Only movement remains. Arms, wheels, shuttles, breath. You are part of the machine. Somewhere a thread snaps again, a sharp sound like a sigh breaking. You turn, rethread it by habit, and continue. Midnight comes and goes, unnoticed. By now the hall feels like a dream you can't wake from. The windows show nothing but blackness, not even the reflection of lamps anymore. You could be anywhere. You could be inside the earth. Your hands ache, but the ache has become familiar, almost companionable. It keeps you awake. Your body hums in time with the belts overhead. Every movement, every clatter, every hiss of thread has a rhythm you've stopped resisting. You think in some far corner of your mind about why people do this, why the machines are never allowed to rest. The answer, of course, is simple. Cotton must move or money stops. The mill's owners sleep somewhere far from here. Their windows dark and peaceful. They'll wake to profit, measured in your blisters. But that isn't new knowledge. It's the air you breathe. A small comfort flickers in the corner. The thought that dawn always comes, that even in this place, someone will open the doors and let the cold morning sweep through. Dust will sparkle in the sunlight for a moment before settling again. You imagine it, the bell ringing, the wheels slowing, the sudden stillness that feels louder than sound. You'll step outside, eyes squinting against the grey sky, lungs tasting real air again. For now you move, slowly, patiently. You survive one more hour. The night is long, but it always ends. You notice the girl beside you hum again. A thread of tune almost lost in the hum of the looms. You catch a fragment of words. Come all you weary. The rest dissolves in motion. When the clock finally shows one, the overseer blows out one lamp. The room dims by a fraction. You take it as a sign. Halfway through, you let your eyes close for a breath, still moving your hands, trusting memory to guide you. The world sways a little. You let it. The bell will ring again soon, and the night will break, as it always does, not with a sunrise but with another sound, another motion, another breath. And when that happens, you'll be ready. Because here, inside the mill that never slept, the only thing that truly matters is that you still are. The clock's single bell strikes 1, a sound so thin it barely carries above the looms. You look up anyway, as though the hour itself had tapped your shoulder. No one speaks. At this time of night, words are useless things. They slide off the air like dust that never lands. Your hands move by memory. Thread, shuttle, pull, tie. The same gestures you've made 1,000 nights before. But something has changed. The world feels suspended. Time moves differently now, stretching like taffy between one heartbeat and the next. The overseer sits for the first time. You catch sight of him at the far end, slumped on a stool, the lantern beside him dimmed to half. For a few moments, the hierarchy of the mill dissolves. Everyone equal in exhaustion. The lamps hiss faintly. Somewhere, water drips. Perhaps condensation from the ceiling pipes. Perhaps a leak no one has the energy to fix. You keep working, not because anyone is watching, but because stopping feels stranger than continuing. Your eyes trace the rhythm of the shuttle, the rise of the beam, the dance of shadow and flame across the walls. In that trance, you begin to think of other things, small, wandering thoughts that slip through fatigue like minnows through reeds. You think of home, the shape of your door, the sound of the bed frame when you sit down, the cool sheet waiting there. You think of bread, and of water that doesn't taste of iron. You even think of the bell that will ring again, announcing that the night has survived itself. For a while the mind becomes merciful. Downstairs the boiler room roars. You feel its pulse through the floorboards, a dull, living heartbeat that vibrates up your ankles. You imagine the 2 men who tend it, sleeves rolled, faces red, skin shining like oiled leather. They speak only when the fire misbehaves. Their shovels scrape the floor like whispers in the dark. One of them hums. You can't hear it directly, but the rhythm of his work reaches you in pulses. 4 beats shovel, 1 beat rest. That pattern travels through the beams, a message in vibration, still here, still awake, still working. The boilers are the true masters of the mill. Everything depends on their mood, too cool, and the looms slow, too hot, and the belts snap. You've heard stories of boilers bursting, sending shards of metal through walls thick as tombs, but that's for daylight gossip. At night, you think only of endurance. You picture them down there, wiping their faces, blinking in the heat. Each shovelful they lift is a promise that your machine above will keep its breath. You owe them a quiet kind of gratitude, though you've never spoken a word. Between 2 and 3. If the night were a person, this would be the hour it begins to question itself. The rhythm falters. Not in the machines, they remain relentless, but in the humans who feed them. A girl drops her shuttle, then stares at it as if unsure what it is. A man rubs his eyes until his knuckles go white. The overseer rouses himself, walks a single round and sits again. The air tastes of metal filings and oil smoke. You feel it coat your tongue. Every sound becomes exaggerated. The scrape of wood, the click of thread, the soft grunt of someone lifting a spool. Time folds in on itself. You think perhaps an hour has passed. But when you glance at the clock, the hands have moved only 5 minutes. Someone laughs, a dry, involuntary sound. You look over. 2 men are arguing about nothing, something to do with thread count or pay rate or the way one of them breathes. It fizzles out before a supervisor can notice. Even anger is too heavy to carry now. The lamps dim, their oil nearly spent. One guttering wick spits a bead of flame onto the table. The girl beside it smothers it calmly with a cloth, never missing her rhythm. The smell of burnt cloth lingers. At 2:45, the bell for the water break rings. It's not really a break, just permission to pause for 30 breaths. You take a cup from the barrel near the door. The water is warm, tasting faintly of tin, but it might as well be a miracle. You drink slowly, closing your eyes. For the first time, you notice how your heartbeat matches the machine's. Thud, whir, thud, whir, the same endless phrase. You think if you ever stop hearing it, the silence will be unbearable. The spinner's story's around 3. Something curious happens. The workers begin to talk. Not loudly, not in full sentences, but in murmurs that drift between stations like threads crossing mid-air. A man tells a story about a mill in Lowell that burned last winter. A woman adds that she once knew a spinner who fell asleep at her frame and never woke. Another says she doesn't believe it. People don't die like that. They just disappear for a while. You listen, half inside the conversation, half elsewhere. There's comfort in voices, even when they say unpleasant things. It means someone is still awake with you. Someone near the door begins humming a hymn. Not the full melody, just the rise and fall of it. A sound made for echoing. You catch the line through the night and over the storm before it dissolves back into the machines. For a moment the mill feels almost holy, like a chapel built from noise and breath. You think of how many people have stood here before you, how many will come after, and how all of you share the same prayer. Let the dawn come soon. The overseer walks by, less a warden now than a ghost of habit. His lantern has gone out. He carries it anyway. The ledger of night. You find yourself near the foreman's desk again. The ledger lies open, its pages curled from humidity. You glance down as you pass. The entries are brief, almost poetic. Output, steady, break, none. Accidents, minor. Beside those words, a blot of ink forms a small star. You wonder who will read it tomorrow. Maybe the owner. Maybe no one. Maybe the mill itself. If walls could read. You realize how many ledgers like this exist, in every town, every factory, every shift that stretches past sanity. All those tiny notations of human endurance disguised as bookkeeping. All the unrecorded hours that truly built the world. You touch the page with one finger, leaving a smudge of dust. Then you move on. The child and the cat near the stairs. You meet the child runner again. He carries a bundle of empty spools and a half-eaten piece of bread. His eyes look older than yours. He grins when he recognizes you, a quick, bright thing in all the dimness, then disappears into the storage room. Moments later, you hear a small sound, a meow, faint and questioning. The mill cat. Every factory has one or several. They keep the rats from chewing through the cotton bales. This one pads along the corridor, tail high, fur thick with dust. It pauses beside your foot, sniffs and moves on, the only creature here allowed to walk without purpose. You envy it, briefly, for the way it owns the night instead of serving it. The cold hour at last. You reach the time the old workers call the cold hour. Some say it comes at 3, others at 4. You know it when you feel it. The sweat dries, the air thins. The warmth of the boilers no longer reaches the upper floors. Every breath tastes like iron and ash. People wrap their scarves tighter. The overseer lights one final lamp. Its light is too small for the room. A single candle against the dark. Your body begins to tremble, not from fear or fatigue, but from the strange realization that you've become part of the mill's rhythm. When it breathes, you breathe. When it stops, so will you. You think of the river outside, frozen at its edges, whispering beneath the ice. You imagine stepping out there, hearing only the sound of your own boots and the water below. That thought alone keeps you warm for a while. A boy sneezes, the sound echoes like gunfire. Everyone jumps, then laughs. A small shared moment of relief. 4:30. Someone whispers that the sky is changing. You glance toward the high windows. They are still black, but maybe a shade less so. The faintest grey threading through. 4:30. Not dawn yet, but the promise of it. And promise is enough to survive on. You notice the girl who hums. She's smiling now, though her lips barely move. Her lamp has gone out, and she works by the light of someone else's. That borrowed glow catches her hair, turning it almost gold. You think how strange it is, this world built on shared light. One flame passed from hand to hand, never enough to brighten the whole room, yet enough to keep everyone alive. The machines begin to slow, just slightly, the tension easing, the pace adjusting as the boilers tire. The overseer doesn't scold. He just watches, as though afraid to disturb the fragile truce between human and machine. The hour bends toward 5. Your fingers are raw, your eyes dry, but you've crossed the invisible line. You've outlasted the hardest part. You are no longer working through the night. You are waiting for morning, and that difference feels like salvation. Reflection: soon the bell will sound again, and the next shift will file in, faces fresh, collars clean, unaware of the ghostly hours you've carried for them. They'll take their places at the same frames, start the same motions, and think the same thoughts about surviving until dusk. But for you, the night has been a kind of teacher. You've seen what keeps the world moving when everyone else is asleep. You've felt the cost of the endless hum, and somehow, you're still standing. You glance once more at the clock. 5 o'clock, exactly. Only an hour until dawn. Only 60 minutes until you step outside and watch the first light touch the smoke. The mill breathes. You breathe. It's almost morning, and for now that is enough. The last hour, 5 o'clock. A strange quiet has settled. Not true silence, just the weariness of a building that knows it's almost done. The looms still turn, but their rhythm is slower, more deliberate, like breathing before sleep. Every motion feels ceremonial now. You count the strokes because counting helps you believe the hour will end. The overseer stirs for the first time in what feels like forever. He straightens his collar, wipes his eyes and glances toward the high windows, where the darkness is softening at the edges. His movements tell you what the clock refuses to. The night is nearly over. The air has changed. It's cooler now, carrying a thin draft from the river. Someone has cracked a side door to let out the steam, and a single shaft of pale air cuts through the haze. It smells faintly of rain and iron, and impossibly. Morning, you lift your head for the first time in hours. Every muscle complains, but you ignore it. You want to see what the sky looks like. Beyond the glass, a line of grey-blue sits just above the horizon, thin as thread. You imagine it tugging the rest of the world awake. The bell before the bell, 5:30. The floor shivers once, as the boilers cool. The machines begin their slow retreat from life. Belts loosen, wheels sigh. The sudden easing of sound is disorienting, as if the earth itself has exhaled. Then comes a smaller bell. Not the great shift bell, but the warning one, meant to tell the night workers that their hours are numbered. It rings only once, clear and silver. No one cheers. You simply look at each other, sharing the private knowledge that you have survived the dark again. The girl beside you, the one who hums, lets out a single laugh. It's small, almost startled, like she's testing whether her voice still works. You smile without meaning to. Somewhere down the line, the child runner drops his last basket of spools and sits cross-legged on the floor, done before anyone tells him he can be. The overseer looks at the clock, then closes his ledger. The page reads only 2 words: output, complete. The doors open. At 6 o'clock, exactly, the final bell rings. This one is deeper, the sound that marks the changing of the world. It rolls through the mill, down the stairs, across the water outside. Every person straightens as if pulled by an invisible string. Then the motion breaks. One by one, the machines stop. The belts hang still, dripping oil. The air cools rapidly in the absence of heat. For the first time in 12 hours, you hear your own breath. The side doors creak open. Fresh air floods the hall like a tide. It carries with it the smell of the river, of smoke, of wet earth. You didn't know how starved you were for air that hadn't already been used. Workers move toward the exits in a slow procession. No one rushes. There is nowhere urgent to be. You walk among them, light-headed, limbs heavy and alien. Your hands feel like someone else's. Outside the light is waiting, not yet bright, but enough to sting the eyes. Crossing the bridge. The world beyond the door looks different than you remembered. The street is slick with dew, and the river carries a thin veil of mist that glows faintly under the rising sun. The mill looms behind you, its chimney already sighing out pale smoke. You've never noticed how much it looks like a fortress, solid, patient, unconcerned with who enters or leaves. You cross the wooden bridge slowly, your boots echo against the planks. Below, the water moves like liquid pewter. A cart rattles past, loaded with new bales for the day shift. The driver nods to you without smiling. Two ghosts passing at the edge of morning. Across the river, small houses crouch under the fog. A woman sweeps her doorstep. A rooster calls uncertainly, as if testing the hour. Life resumes in tiny gestures. You glance back once. The mill's windows gleam in the first true sunlight. From a distance it almost looks peaceful. A cathedral of industry, its congregation dismissed. But you know better. Inside, the next shift is already filing in. The walk home, the road home, feels longer than it did yesterday, though it hasn't changed at all. Every sound is too loud after the muffled thunder of the mill, the creak of wagons, the slap of your soles in puddles, the sudden clamour of morning birds. You pass the bakery. The door is open, and the smell of yeast drifts out, warm and impossible. For a moment, you stop and simply breathe it in. The baker, a thick-armed man with flour in his hair, gives you a nod. He knows the look of a night worker. He offers no words, just pulls a small loaf from a tray and sets it on the sill. You leave a few coins beside it and keep walking. The bread is still hot enough to sting your fingers. You tear a piece and chew slowly. It tastes of salt, smoke, and relief. At the corner, a group of children chase each other through the fog, shrieking with laughter. One of them stumbles and looks up at you, startled by your pale, lint-covered face. Then he grins and runs off again. You envy him the way he runs toward the day, while you limp away from it. Your door is warped from the damp. It takes 2 tries to push it open. Inside, the single room feels impossibly still, a world preserved in amber. The small table, the basin, the narrow bed waiting like a question. You set the bread on the table and light the stub of a candle. The flame quivers, painting everything in gold and fatigue. You wash your hands in cold water. The dirt peels away in grey ribbons. For a moment, you watch it swirl and vanish down the basin. Proof that the night happened. Proof that it's over. You sit on the bed. The sheets smell faintly of soap and wool. You realize you've been awake for 22 hours. You remove your boots but not your clothes. Lying down feels like falling into a slow river. Your ears still ring with the memory of machines. You think you can hear the faint echo of them even now. But maybe it's your own pulse. Either way, it's steady. That's enough. Dreams of thread sleep comes in fragments. You drift in and out, half dreaming of the mill even here. In your dream, the machines move without noise. Threads turn into rivers. Rivers turn into cloth. Cloth becomes sky. Everything weaves together endlessly. Sometimes you see faces. The girl who hums, the boy with the basket, the cat stalking the aisles. They move in slow motion, like figures underwater. You want to tell them it's over. That morning came, but your voice won't form. Instead, you watch as the light in the dream brightens until it fills the whole frame. When you wake, it's afternoon. Sunlight stretches across the floor in long white lines. The world is ordinary again, which feels almost miraculous. Reflection history will call this progress. New machines, new wealth, new nations built on motion. Few will remember the people who kept the motion from stopping. But if anyone ever asks what it felt like, you could tell them, quietly, that it was not noise or power that defined it, but rhythm. A pulse shared between man and machine, candle and cloth, night and morning. You could say that survival is not always heroic. Sometimes it's simply staying awake long enough to see the light change color. And that, in its own quiet way, is everything. You look once more toward the horizon. Smoke, sky, river, all the same grey. Now, the day will end as it always does, folding back into night, beginning the pattern again. But for this moment, between shifts, between bells, the world belongs to you. You breathe in, slow and steady. You exhale, tasting dust and dawn. And for the briefest heartbeat before the next sound begins, the mill truly sleeps. The cue, the mill's bell, has fallen silent, but another rhythm has already begun. The shuffle of boots toward the pay office. You join the line without thinking. It's what comes next. Everyone stands in the narrow yard, blinking against the pale daylight. Steam still leaks from the vents like sighs from the building's lungs. The pay window is a square of shadow beneath an iron awning. Inside, a clerk sits at a tall desk, his hair neatly parted, cuffs spotless. He looks as though he's never been warm or tired. Beside him, a locked box gleams faintly, the week's wages measured in coins. The line moves slowly. You study the others, faces powdered with cotton dust, collars stiff with sweat. None of you speak. Speech feels like a thing belonging to night. The only sounds are the scrape of coins, the rustle of paper, the low cough of the boilers cooling behind you. When your turn comes, the clerk doesn't look up. He slides a small envelope across the counter. Your name misspelled. Your pay, exact to the halfpenny. You open it and count. Enough for rent, bread, and perhaps a candle or two. Not enough for rest. Behind you, the next worker steps forward. The clerk says the same words he's said all morning. Next, sign here. You sign though the pen shakes in your hand. Outside, the crowd scatters like smoke. Some head home, some to the tavern. A few straight back inside. They've been hired for the day shift too. You slip the envelope into your pocket and begin the walk toward town. The market hour. The streets are awake now. Carts creak over cobblestones, horses snort. Vendors shout the price of apples. You move through it like a ghost. The noise distant, unreal. A woman at a stall calls out that today's potatoes are cheaper if you buy by the sack. You nod, but your body keeps walking. Your mind still hums with the rhythm of the looms. You pause at a corner where two streets meet. Here the air smells of yeast and iron, bread from one direction, the blacksmith's forge from another. This is the scent of the town's heartbeat, the blend that seeps into your clothes and never leaves. You buy a loaf, a wedge of cheese and a handful of onions. The vendor counts out your change without smiling. Everyone is tired here. Everyone is counting something. Hours, coins, heartbeats. As you turn to leave, a child bumps into your leg. He's carrying a spool nearly as big as his head. You recognize him, one of the new runners. He looks up, eyes bright, and says he's late. You let him go. The market bell chimes 9. The day is already half old. The lodging house. Your lodging sits 3 streets up from the river, wedged between a cooper's shop and a tavern. The sign outside reads rooms by the week. Inside, the corridor smells of damp wood and boiled cabbage. You climb the stairs, each step creaking like an argument. Your room is small. A bed, a chair, a wash basin, and a window that doesn't quite close. Sunlight spills across the floorboards, warm and merciless. You drop your bundle and sit. The silence presses against your ears. You can still hear the machines, phantom echoes circling behind your eyes. On the table lies a slip of paper from the landlord. Rent due Monday. No exceptions. You fold it neatly and place it beneath your wages. For a moment, you simply stare at both. Paper that measures your existence. Then you stretch out on the bed and close your eyes. Sleep comes in shallow bursts, each one shorter than the last. When you finally wake, it's noon. The sunlight has shifted. The room smells of dust and heat. You wash your face again, put on a clean collar, and prepare to collect what's left of the day. The counting house. Every Thursday, the mill owner's assistant holds a meeting in the counting house. A ritual as mechanical as the looms themselves. You've been asked to deliver the night shift ledger. The counting house sits apart from the main yard, its walls freshly painted, its windows trimmed with green. Inside, the floors are carpeted, a luxury you notice immediately. The assistant is a thin man with spectacles and a watch chain thick as rope. He greets you politely, calls you useful, and flips through the ledger with a satisfied hum. He never looks up when he says it. Productivity's improving. The new schedule seems efficient. Efficient, the word tastes metallic. He hands you a paper to sign, proof of delivery, and dismisses you with a nod. On the wall behind him hangs a framed motto in gilt letters. Labor is progress. You leave without speaking. Outside, the sunlight feels too bright. The tavern at noon. By midday, the tavern is already full. Night workers drift in one by one, still smelling of oil and smoke. The barkeep knows them all. He pours without asking. You take a seat near the window. The light filters through bottles lined on the sill, turning the air into shades of amber and green. A man nearby tells a story about a new factory being built downriver, larger, faster, with machines that can run day and night without rest. The table goes quiet. Someone jokes that soon even the moon will need permission to rise. A few laugh, most don't. You sip your drink slowly. The warmth of it travels up your spine, dull and heavy. Outside, the sound of hammers begins again. The next generation of buildings growing out of the old ones. When you leave, the sun has moved behind a thin veil of cloud. The streets shimmer with heat, and the air hums with work. The children's hour, you wander toward the river. School has just let out, and children scatter across the narrow lanes like sparks from a forge. Some head home with books under their arms. Others run errands for mothers who work the day shift. You stop near a fence, where two boys are trading marbles. One shows the other a new kind, a blue glass piece shaped like a tiny globe. He says it came from the owner's son who never needs to work at all. You think about that boy, the soft hands, the clean cuffs, the easy sleep. Then you think of the runner who carried water at 2 in the morning. Both live in the same town. Both will inherit its future, though one will build it and the other will own it. You keep walking. The thought follows you like a shadow. The meeting in the evening. A few workers gather behind the mill. Someone has brought a newspaper clipping about new laws being discussed in Parliament. Something about limiting the hours of women and children. The older men shake their heads. They've heard it before, but the younger ones listen, eyes bright with a hope they can't quite name. You stand at the edge of the circle. You don't speak. Hope feels dangerous, like standing too close to the furnace. A woman reads aloud from the paper. A 10-hour day shall be deemed sufficient labor for a child under 13. There's laughter, bitter and short. Someone mutters that the lawmen should try it themselves. Then the group disperses before the overseer sees them. You stay a moment longer, staring at the river's reflection of the mill lights. They look like stars trapped underwater. The paymaster's math later that week. You study your wages again. Rent, bread, soap, candles, each coin already claimed. You realize that the only thing truly yours is time, and even that is borrowed. You calculate what another shift would bring. You add, subtract, sigh. Numbers can be cruel in their honesty. You think of the owner's house on the hill, its gas lamps, its piano, its windows that glow late into the night for pleasure rather than necessity. You wonder if he ever listens to the sound of his own mill from up there. Perhaps he thinks it's the sound of progress, not people. You fold the envelope again and place it beneath the candle. The wax drips onto the paper like sealing tears. Evening again. By the time the sun sets, the town has quieted. Smoke settles low over the roofs, painting everything the color of tin. You walk the familiar path back toward the bridge. The first shift of the new night is already forming outside the gate. Faces both new and known. Someone nods to you, a silent greeting of recognition. You nod back. The exchange feels sacred, a passing of an invisible torch. The mill looms ahead, lanterns glowing in its windows like the eyes of a creature that never blinks. You pause at the threshold, listening to the muffled thrum beginning inside. It's strange after a day of freedom. The sound feels almost comforting. The foreman spots you and raises an eyebrow. Back again, he asks. You shrug. He doesn't wait for an answer. You step inside. The air closes around you. Warm, heavy, familiar. The machines breathe. The night begins again. Reflection. This is what daylight buys. A handful of coins, a few hours of rest, a brief illusion of choice, enough to make you return. Some will call it resilience. Others will call it necessity. You know it's both. In the ledgers your name will appear once a week beside the word steady. No one will record the thoughts that filled the hours between shifts, the smell of bread, the sound of laughter, the fragile hope that things might change. Yet those moments matter too. They are the hidden wages of survival, the small payments the soul demands when the body spends itself for coin. You look once more at the river before stepping fully into the glow of the mill. The water catches the light and throws it back at the sky, as if to remind it that reflection is also a form of labor. You take your place. You lift your hands. The first wheel turns, and beneath the hum of progress, your heart keeps time. Because this, in the end, is the true economy of the world, the trade between exhaustion and mourning. The morning view, you wake later than your workers, though you like to tell yourself otherwise. The curtains of your study are heavy enough to delay dawn. When you draw them back, the river glitters below and the mill stands opposite, square, patient, breathing out its morning smoke. From this distance it looks peaceful, almost pastoral. The yard is a patch of grey-green, the wheel turning lazily, the roofs lined with frost. You think of it as your creation, an organism made from timber and sweat and the right kind of ambition. You sip coffee while it's still too hot. The cup is porcelain, thin enough that you can see the light through it. The newspaper lies folded beside your ledger. Its headline praises a new engine in Manchester that promises double output with half the fuel. You make a note in the margin, write to supplier. Outside, the mill bell rings, faint but distinct. Another shift has begun. You tell yourself it's progress. The counting house, your carriage reaches the mill by 9. The air inside is warmer than expected, heavy with oil and the sweet, woolly scent of production. Workers glance up as you pass, but only briefly. They know better than to stare. The foreman meets you at the door of the counting house, cap in hand. "Steady output, sir," he says. You nod. It's the phrase you like to hear most. Inside, the ledger books sit waiting. Their pages a landscape of numbers, each line a neat, obedient proof that labor can be contained, quantified, controlled. You flip through them slowly, savoring the columns of ink, wages paid, goods shipped, accidents minimal. You stop on that last line. Accidents. The word is small, only 9 letters, but it contains so much. You close the book before the thought can grow teeth. On the wall hangs a chart you had commissioned. Annual productivity, 1837, 1841. The bars climb upward like the steps of heaven. You stare at it for a while, imagining each line as a ladder rung leading away from uncertainty. Outside, the mill's noise swells and subsides like a tide. You rest your palm against the wall and feel its tremor. Alive, you think. Always alive. The visitors at 11, a pair of gentlemen arrive. Investors from London, all fine coats and cologne. They nod approvingly at the machinery, their faces arranged into polite awe. You give them the tour, the new boilers, the looms imported from Leeds, the yard where the finished cloth is dried. They ask the usual questions. How many hands? How many spindles? How many hours? You answer smoothly, the way one might recite the features of a prize horse. When one of them remarks that it must be exhausting to keep such an enterprise running without pause, you smile. The machines never tire, you say, and you believe it. Later, as you escort them back to their carriage, one mentions rumours of strikes in Manchester, whispers of shorter hours, better pay. You wave it off. Sentiment, you call it. Progress cannot be negotiated. When they're gone, you linger by the gate. The sound of the looms continues, steady as breath. Somewhere, a child coughs. You look away. The house on the hill. At noon you return home. The servants have laid lunch in the glass conservatory, where sunlight turns the air warm and clean. From here the mill looks like a model, something manageable, distant, unthreatening. Your wife asks if business is good. You tell her yes. She nods and pours tea. The silver spoon clinks gently against the cup, a rhythm far softer than the mill's, but somehow similar. She talks about a neighbour's new piano, about a garden party next week. You nod again, half listening. Part of your mind stays with the machines. You imagine them continuing without you, shuttles flashing, wheels turning, cloth unspooling like an endless dream. You say, mostly to yourself, "It's remarkable what men can build." Your wife smiles politely, unsure if it was meant for her. After lunch, you walk the garden path. The earth is soft underfoot. A gardener trims the hedges, their shears snipping in rhythmic intervals. The sound reminds you of the looms again. You wonder if that's progress too, the way even beauty now mimics machinery. The letter, in your study, a letter waits on the desk. It's from the overseer, a report written in neat, nervous script. One worker injured during night shift. Minor, machinery intact. Machinery intact. The phrasing soothes you more than the injury concerns you. You place the letter in a drawer and lock it. There are more letters, from merchants, from banks, from politicians who use words like opportunity and industry and empire. You sign each one carefully. Your handwriting is elegant, controlled, utterly detached from sweat or fatigue. When you seal the last envelope, your hand trembles slightly. You tell yourself it's from the ink fumes. You glance at the clock. 2 in the afternoon. Another 6 hours until the night shift begins. Another 6 before the wheel starts turning again in earnest. You rub your temples and whisper the familiar reassurance. The machines never tire. The visit to the floor. Sometimes you walk the factory floor at dusk, just before the lamps are lit. The workers step aside, creating a narrow path for you. You nod to them, careful to look interested, but not sentimental. A few meet your gaze, most don't. The smell hits you first. Oil, sweat, wool and iron. It's the scent of creation, though no painter will ever bottle it. You pause near a loom, watch the shuttle blur back and forth. A young woman tends it, her fingers moving with perfect precision. For a moment you imagine she is music made visible, the metronome of progress given flesh. Then you notice the small cut on her knuckle, the tremor in her wrist. You step back. The foreman asks if you'd like to see the new weaving frame. You nod, relieved for the change of subject. As you move away, you tell yourself that cuts heal quickly. It's the price of advancement, minor, inevitable. The phrase fits neatly into your mind, where it stays like a well-oiled cog. The dinner conversation that evening. You host a merchant from Liverpool. He deals in cotton imports, speaks of ships and tariffs, of the great web that connects the world's labor. He tells you of plantations across the ocean, where cotton grows under hotter suns and harsher rules. You nod, pour more wine, pretend not to imagine the hands that picked it. The merchant laughs about the global miracle of trade. You laugh too, because that's what good company requires. Later, as he leaves, he compliments the perfection of your cloth. Soft as moonlight, he says. You thank him, and the words echo long after the door closes. Soft as moonlight, a strange choice. You think of your workers at 2 in the morning. Eyes burning, fingers bleeding. Moonlight is soft, yes, but it reveals every flaw. You pour yourself another glass and stand by the window until the wine cools in your hand. When the house sleeps, you remain awake. You sit in the study, listening. Through the open window comes the distant murmur of the mill, a low, continuous hum, like a giant breathing beneath the earth. At first you found it comforting, proof that the world kept turning, that work went on even as you rested. Now it feels heavier, like a heartbeat you can't escape. You light a candle, open a ledger, pretend to work. Numbers blur on the page. Behind your eyes you see the factory floor, the endless motion, the pale faces, the spinning threads. You tell yourself again, the machines never tire, but you do. Your head drops forward. The candle gutters. When you wake, wax has spilled across the desk, hard and white as bone. The flame has died, but the hum continues. The dream you dream of the mill, though not as it is. In the dream it stands empty, machines motionless, air clear, windows open to the sky. You walk the aisles and hear only wind. Then, one by one, the looms begin to move, not from any hand you can see, but by their own will. Threads rise into the air like cobwebs catching light. They weave themselves into shapes, faces, hands, breath, until the whole room seems alive again. You call out, but your voice is swallowed by the sound. When you reach for the stop lever, it's gone. The machines keep weaving. When you look closer, the threads are red. You wake before dawn, sweating. Outside, the mill's chimney is already smoking. The dream slips away, leaving only its residue, the faint, metallic taste of fear, reflection. You dress carefully, as always. The morning sun touches the brass buttons of your coat, the polished toes of your shoes. You look every bit the master of progress. At breakfast, your wife asks if you slept well. You say yes. You always say yes. The carriage waits outside. You step in, gloved hands on polished wood, and let the horses carry you down the hill. The road bends and the mill rises into view. Smoke curls upward, soft as silk. You watch it twist and vanish into the brightening sky. For a moment you think of stopping the carriage, of walking through the yard, of saying something to the people inside. But what would you say? That you understand, that you're grateful, that the hum in your ears sometimes sounds like prayer. The horses keep moving. The thought fades. You straighten your cuffs and open your ledger. The day begins again. And beneath all the numbers, the same truth hums quietly, inescapable as the mill itself. The machines never tire. But neither, it seems, do their masters. The river that once breathed once. There was a river that sang. That's what the oldest residents say. Though few remember how it sounded. Long before the first wheel was built, before smoke learned to crawl across the sky, it moved freely, cold, clear, wide. Children swam in it. Women washed linens along its edges. Fishermen cast nets that caught both fish and silence. You can still see traces of that time if you stand at the right angle. The shape of an old weir, half buried in silt, or a stone worn smooth by years of patient water. But most of it is gone now, eaten by the city that grew around it. The river still moves, yes, but slower. It carries a skin of oil, a taste of metal. Its voice has changed from song to whisper, from whisper to murmur, from murmur to sigh, and still the mills drink from it. Wheel after wheel, day after day, the city drinks too, though it never quite quenches its thirst. The growth, it began with one mill, then 2, then 10. The land around them thickened. New chimneys, new rows of worker cottages, new taverns that opened before dawn and closed after it. From the air, if you could see it, the pattern would look like rust spreading across metal. You live inside that pattern now. Every street bears the name of something conquered. Foundry Lane, Factory Row, Steam Court. At night, each one glows with the same dull light, gas lamps haloed in soot, windows bright with industry. The stars no longer reach you here. The sky has become another ceiling, grey even at midnight. Still, the city is alive, not dead, not dying, just transforming. It breathes through its chimneys, it thinks through its gears, it feeds on coal, on time, on bodies. And when it grows hungry, it devours the spaces that once made it human. The tenements you rent a room in one of the new buildings on Threadneedle Street. The walls are thin enough to hear your neighbor's cough. The hallway smells of damp cloth and cabbage boiled too long. Every floor houses a dozen families, each with its own rhythm. Babies crying, pots clanging, someone laughing as if defying gravity. You lie in bed and listen. The sounds overlap like machinery, but gentler somehow. Proof that even in confinement, life invents its own symphony. In the mornings, water lines stretch down the stairwell. A woman 2 doors down keeps a bucket by her bed, so she won't lose her place. The pipes cough when the first taps open, a chorus of hollow throats clearing themselves for another day. You tell yourself it's temporary, that better housing will come with time. But time in this city has already been bought by someone else. The street of trades outside. The streets are an anatomy of need. Every shop sells something the factories consume. Thread, soap, lantern oil, bread. Children run errands for pennies, their small hands blackened by coins. A man sells tea from a cart, his kettle hissing beside the curb. He calls out prices over the rumble of wagons. The smell of the tea, sharp, comforting, mixes with the stench of tanneries and horse manure. It's all one air now. Smoke and sweetness and survival. You pause by a print shop window displaying broadsides. One headline shouts about a fire at a nearby mill. Another celebrates a new rail line, promising faster trade. Progress and tragedy, printed side by side, sharing the same ink. You move on. In the reflection of the glass you see your own face. Pale, lint-dusted, eyes that flicker like lamp wicks nearing their end. The rail yard beyond the factories. The railway sprawls like a metallic spider web. Engines groan, coupling rods clank, and the scent of coal fills every breath. Men move between wagons, shouting to be heard over the hiss of steam. Each train carries something the city has eaten, and something else it's about to. You climb a low embankment to watch. From here you can see everything. the river twisting beneath its soot, the mills lining its banks, the endless rows of rooftops beyond. It's beautiful, in a way that feels both holy and cursed. A cathedral built for motion. A boy sits beside you, counting the passing cars aloud. He says he wants to be a driver someday, to see what lies beyond the smoke. You tell him there's always another city waiting at the other end, just like this one. He nods, unconvinced. You envy his hope, but not his lungs. When the engine whistles, the sound cuts through your bones. For a moment, everything stops. Conversation, thought, even breath. Then the noise resumes, louder than before. The air itself, by midday, the haze has thickened. It hangs low enough to taste. Doctors call it miasma. Preachers call it punishment. You call it weather. Every window carries the same layer of grime, softening the edges of the world. Children draw shapes in it with their fingers. Mothers scold them, though they do the same when no one's watching. At times sunlight breaks through, thin, watery, reluctant. The beams catch the smoke in midair, turning it golden, almost divine. The city looks momentarily redeemed, as if heaven itself were leaking through its wounds. But when the light fades, the soot remains. It settles on hair, on bread, on river, on heart. You wipe it away again and again. It always returns. The bells. The city is ruled by bells. Each mill has one. Each church another. They overlap, echoing across rooftops like 1,000 arguments. Together they create a rhythm no one controls, a mechanical heartbeat for a living organism. You've learned their language. The long single peal that calls the day shift. The short double that signals break. The faint, tired ring of the night release. Sometimes they seem to speak to each other, one answering another, as though the mills gossip through sound. Even in sleep, your body responds to them, twitching at every change of tone. The bells mark your life more faithfully than calendars ever could. You wonder if, one day, even death will wait for its signal before approaching. The city's appetite. The city hungers. You can feel it in the way buildings rise overnight, devouring gardens, courtyards, empty lots. What was once a field last year is now a row of chimneys. The river's edge, once soft with reeds, is now lined with stone and soot. There are men who call this progress, and they say it with reverence. They speak of population, trade, empire, as if these are virtues rather than appetites. They never mention the taste of the air or the color the river has turned. At the edge of town, a family builds a new home from the bones of an old one. They dig into the foundation and find pieces of pottery, a horseshoe, a child's marble. They keep none of it. There's no time for memory here, only forward motion. You pass them on your way to work and think. The city eats everything, even its own past. The night streets. When evening falls, the lamps flare to life. Gas lines hiss softly beneath the pavement. A hidden circulatory system. Shadows stretch long and thin across the cobbles, their edges trembling like candle flames. People move through them. Clerks, sweepers, errand boys, women carrying bread or laundry. Their faces are pale moons floating above the dark fabric of the streets. You notice how the city changes character after sunset. It becomes almost tender, less proud, more uncertain of itself. The noise softens, the smoke settles, the reflection of lamps turns the river to molten gold. You walk beside it for a while. In the water you can see the mills inverted, towers reaching downward, chimneys plunging into an invisible sky. It looks like another city beneath the surface, a darker twin. You wonder which one is more real, reflection. The city has no single master. Now, it belongs to its own hunger, to coal and cloth, to noise and night. Every person within it plays a role. Spinner, clerk, carrier, builder, dreamer. Each adds one motion, one breath, to the great machine. You've learned to live inside its rhythm, to find moments of peace between its teeth. Sometimes at dawn, when the fog is thickest, you think you can still hear the river's old voice beneath the hum, a faint, steady pulse reminding you that life existed before smoke, and will again after it. You close your eyes. The air smells of ash and rain. The mills sigh, the rails gleam, the water moves on. Somewhere a bell begins to ring. Slow, deliberate, familiar. The city stirs. You open your eyes and step forward, because here in the city that ate the river, The only way to survive is to keep walking, quietly, steadily, before it remembers it hasn't finished its meal. The sound that never ends. You have learned to live inside the hum. At first it was a noise, now it is a landscape. When the mill sleeps you can still hear it. Faint and distant, threading itself through your dreams like a second heartbeat. It's in everything, the rhythm of footsteps, the tick of clocks, even the sigh of wind between the chimneys. Sometimes you wonder whether the sound has seeped into the bricks themselves, a low vibration that will continue long after the last machine stops turning. People call it progress, but it feels more like memory. Not yours, not anyone's. Something older, colder, forged by repetition, until it became a kind of ghost. The machines remember every hand that touched them. They remember the accidents, the heat, the laughter that somehow still existed between the shifts. They keep it all, and though they have no eyes, they seem to watch you. The loom's language. The overseer says the machines have no mind. He is wrong. Each loom speaks in its own rhythm, a staccato dialect of wooden taps and metal sighs. You can tell them apart the way you might recognize a friend by their breathing. One rattles like teeth in winter. Another hums low and smooth, patient as an animal in deep thought. There's one in the corner, a newer model, that pauses at regular intervals, as though hesitating to remember what it was doing. You find that oddly comforting. When the foreman passes, you keep your head down, but the machines whisper their secrets anyway. They tell you who has fallen behind, whose thread has snapped, who will soon be too tired to continue. They speak in motion, not words, and if you listen long enough, you can almost hear something else beneath it, a pulse, a pattern, the faint suggestion of a heartbeat that isn't human. You wonder if, when you are gone, the machines will miss you. The apprentice. There's a new boy tonight. Thin, quick, eyes like a fox. He asks you how long it takes to stop hearing the noise after work. You tell him you don't remember. He laughs softly, thinking you're joking. You watch him tie his first thread, hands trembling slightly. The loom clatters back in response, louder than before. The boy startles. You rest a hand on his shoulder and whisper, "It's just learning your rhythm." He stares at you like you've said something superstitious. Hours later you find him speaking to the machine, apologizing when he drops a shuttle. You smile. He's already learning that the machines prefer politeness. The workshop at midnight past midnight, when the supervisors retreat to the office, the looms seem to shift tone. Their clatter deepens, as if relieved to speak freely. You can almost believe they're conversing among themselves, comparing the day's work, the heat, the hands. Sometimes a gear slips or a wheel moans, and the sound resembles a sigh. It doesn't frighten you anymore. There's something human in it, a shared exhaustion, a quiet companionship between the living and the made. In one corner, an engineer adjusts a belt while humming an old hymn. He wipes the oil from his hands onto his vest, looks up and says, "She's temperamental tonight." He means the loom, of course. Everyone does. No one says it. The machines are always she, as though the entire industry were one great body of labor, maternal, relentless, consuming. The historians visit one day. A man with ink-stained cuffs arrives. He says he's writing a book about progress, about how the modern world was born here. He walks among the rows of machines, taking notes. He listens carefully to their rhythm, then declares, "They sound alive." You and the others glance at each other, but say nothing. He's only just arrived. He doesn't yet understand how literal that is. He interviews the overseer, the clerk, even the child runners. His questions are tidy, his handwriting neat. He wants to know about hours and wages, not ghosts. When he asks you what the machines sound like, you think for a long time before answering. "They sound like they're remembering," you say. He writes that down, smiling politely. He thinks it's poetry. That night, as you walk home, you pass the river, and imagine the historian sitting in his rented room, describing your world as though it were already history. You wonder if, when his book is printed, the machines will recognize themselves in it. The breaker's room once every few weeks. One of the great looms is dismantled for repair. When the gears are lifted from their housing, they gleam in the lamplight, like organs removed from a body. The mechanic wipes them with a rag dipped in oil, whispering to them under his breath. You can never make out the words. He says they store tension, that each tooth, each bolt, holds a record of the strain it's borne. When a machine finally fails, he insists, it's not wear that kills it, but memory, too much pressure remembered for too long. You don't argue. You've seen the same thing happen to people. The archive of oil, everywhere you touch. The oil follows. It marks your fingers, your sleeves, the hem of your apron. When you wipe your face, it leaves a fingerprint the size of the world. The overseer calls it grime. You call it record, because oil remembers too, each smudge a note in the long diary of labor. The walls are covered in it, layered year upon year. If someone scraped them clean, the building itself might forget who built it. Sometimes you press your hand flat against the wall, leaving a dark imprint, a signature, not of ownership, but of presence, proof that you were here, even if no ledger records your name. The electric rumor lately, there's talk of new machines coming from London, ones powered not by steam, but by invisible current. Electricity, they call it. The word feels sharp in the mouth, full of promise and threat. The foreman says it will make work easier. The older men laugh at that. They've heard easier before. You imagine wires running along the walls like veins, light without flame, motion without breath. You wonder if these new machines will remember too, if memory needs heat, or if cold energy can hold it just as well. Some nights you dream of them, silent looms that weave without touch, that never need tending, that never sleep. In those dreams the air itself hums. When you wake, you realize you've been holding your breath. The factory in winter makes everything louder. The cold hardens the air, sharpening each sound. The machines creak, the belts crack, the metal sings under strain. Even silence feels brittle. The workers wrap scarves around their mouths, eyes watering in the chill. You pull your gloves tighter, feeling the pulse of motion through the fabric. The rhythm never changes. It's as if the machines refuse to acknowledge the season, unwilling to slow for anything as human as cold. At break time, you stand by the window. Outside, the snow falls thick and grey, melting before it touches the river. You realize that even winter can't stop the heat of industry. The world keeps turning, one cog at a time. One evening, as the shift ends, you stay behind. The others file out, their footsteps fading down the corridor. You stand in the middle of the floor, surrounded by rows of motionless machines. Without the noise, the room feels enormous. You can hear your own heartbeat again, hesitant, uncertain, oddly small. You reach out and touch the nearest loom. Its surface is still warm. You close your eyes. For a moment, you imagine it breathing, exhaling softly in gratitude or exhaustion. You can't tell which. You whisper to it, the same way the mechanic did. Rest now. The silence answers with a faint tick, a gear settling into place, or maybe a sigh of recognition. You realize something then. The machines are not monsters. They are mirrors. They remember because you taught them how. Every movement, every repetition, every hour you traded for survival, it lives inside them now, turning even when you sleep. And long after you're gone, long after the mill closes and the city forgets your name, someone will walk through these ruins, hear the wind moving through the rusted frames, and think it sounds like music. They'll be right, because the machines never truly stop. They only learn a slower rhythm, the rhythm of memory. Rumors with wires attached it. Begins as endings do with rumors. Not the soft gossip of the break room, but a sharper kind that carries blueprints in its mouth. Men from London arrive with cases that click. They unroll drawings across the counting house table like sails. They speak in a new grammar: volt, alternator, dynamo, efficiency. The overseer repeats the words the way a child rolls marbles in his palm, delighted by the hardness of them. At first, the talk feels distant, as if it belonged to some brighter city. You keep to your loom. The old rhythm holds: shuttle, tie, turn, breathe. Because rhythm always believes in itself. Then one morning the floor is marked with chalk. White lines cut aisles where your arms used to reach. A surveyor measures the ceiling with a brass instrument that looks like a small telescope. The boy who runs spools pauses to watch and asks what it sees. Tomorrow, the surveyor answers, without smiling. The rumor becomes a date, unbolting the past. They start in the corner, where the older frames stand like patient horses. Teams arrive with wrenches and polite apologies. The first bolt takes half an hour to loosen. It resists like a memory. When it breaks free, the sound is not a clang but a sigh, and everyone steps back as if a ghost had left the room. You expect grief to be loud, but here it is matter of fact. Metal is carried away on shoulders. Wooden rails are stacked with the neatness of coffins. Someone sweeps the floor where the machine once breathed, and when the dust settles, the space looks indecently clean. Your hands ache to do the old work. Your brain keeps reaching for a lever that is no longer there. You touch your apron and find the outline of a tool you won't need again. It feels like discovering a scar on a stranger's skin. On the wall, the clock continues with perfect manners. It does not note the absence. Time, too, has automation in mind. Demonstration day. The electric machines arrive in crates that smell of new varnish and distant rain. They are quiet even before they start. A threatening courtesy. The owner stands near the door with investors, their collars white as winter. The engineer moves along the line, connecting sinew made of wire, whispering to switches, arranging a ceremony of sparks. He invites the foreman to press the first button. The foreman hesitates. A man accustomed to levers distrusts circles, then lowers his thumb. A soft click, a hum like a held breath. Belts do not whip, wheels do not plead. The new looms begin moving with a motion too smooth to seem honest. They do not cough or remember. They perform. The investors smile. The owner's jaw loosens. The engineer says, "With 2 operators we can manage 12 frames." You look down at your hands and count how many they are not. The room smells different when electricity breathes. Less oil, more singed dust. A faint sweetness like rain on stone. The old machines watch from the far wall where they have been herded. Sleeping horses facing a row of metal deer. The noise is wrong. Not the layered dialect you've learned to love in spite of everything, but a smooth chorus designed to be ignored. You realize with a small, precise pain that your skill included the ability to hear. Progress has announced it has no need of ears. The lessons no one teaches retraining is a word with too many teeth. A clerk reads a list of names. Some will become operators of the new line. Some tally sheets in a room without windows. Some will learn to pack bolts of cloth in crates 3 times the size of the old ones. The rest will be released to opportunity. You try the new panel. Instead of tying threads by feel, you watch lights, green for steady, amber for caution, red for fault. Your hands hover, uncertain. You miss the intimacy of danger. The way the old loom bled if you touched it wrong. The way it forgave you if you learnt its mood. Don't intervene unless the light tells you, the engineer says. You stand still and practice obedience. It is the least human of skills and thus the most valuable. By noon you realize the room contains more silence than people. Air gathers in the corners like a folded flag. Conversations shrink to numbers. A woman who once hummed through the long nights now keeps her lips pressed together, as if songs might trigger a red light. You go home with clean sleeves and feel unreasonably ashamed. Streets that don't know your name when a factory changes its mind. The city must change its face. Boarding houses begin to empty in curious patches. A door with a nailed-up notice beside a window where a child still presses his nose against the glass. The tea man lingers later at the corner and counts out fewer cups. The tin clink seems louder. At the market, the price of onions drops because fewer stew pots are being filled. The railway keeps its schedule, but the station echoes in the early hours. On the platform, you recognize a man from the boiler room. He holds a single bag and looks at the departures as if they were the sky. He says there is work upriver where steam still matters. You wish him luck and feel the absurd desire to give him your hands, which suddenly seem like coins that have gone out of circulation. Even the river notices. Where lint once skinned its surface, a new clarity appears, not clean, not pure, but less haunted. You imagine fish taking a vote on whether to return. The day the bell forgot. The bell does not ring one morning. No broken rope, no missing ringer. It simply forgets. or the men who wound it forget. Or someone decided the new machines did not require rights. Work begins anyway at the push of a button. You stand under the tower and feel an absence approach from a distance you cannot name. The city's rhythm wobbles. A church across the river tries to compensate, ringing twice where it used to ring once. As if bells could apologize for each other. They cannot. Inside, the new line hums with polite indifference. A woman coughs once and the sound carries the whole length of the hall, startling even her. You whisper to the nearest frame. Nothing answers. That evening in bed, the hush presses against your chest like a book. You realize the night does not need to shout to keep you awake. The last of the old ones. They remove the oldest loom on a Thursday, when the light is kind and the air is cooperative. A dozen men and a winch, and still it protests. Not with noise but with weight. The floorboards remember where it stood. The bolts come away reluctantly with threads of wood in their teeth. You ask for a moment alone with it. No one laughs, everyone wants to say goodbye to something these days. You place your palm against the beam you've leaned into for years. The wood is not warm, not now, but there's a residue of days in it, as if sweat could become grain. You tell it what you can't tell people, that you are grateful for the way it demanded things you could give. Attention, patience, skill, blood in small negotiable amounts. When they carry it away, dust floats in the air where its shadow used to live. The void rings like a glass. The mechanic, greyer than he was, says he'll keep one gear for the mantle. Something should remember us, he says. You say we will, and hope he doesn't hear the question inside the promise. The museum that isn't open yet. Months pass. The city learns to hold its breath for longer stretches. Then a letter appears on the notice board. Historical Society seeks artifacts of our industrial age. The word artifact arrives like winter, dignifying what it freezes. They borrow the foreman's ledger, the bell rope, a lamp chimney fogged with decades of breath. A cart arrives for a loom that survived the purge. A boy sits proudly atop it as if astride a mild dragon. The engineer explains things to the curator, in a patient voice. He gets facts right and the meanings wrong, the way history tends to. You watch the procession leave and imagine a day when schoolchildren will stand before glass and read, "This machine wove cloth, day and night." No plaque will mention how workers timed grief by the shuttle's pass, how love messages were stitched under breath, how the night taught prayers to mouths that claimed they didn't believe. A museum is a kind of silence that glows. You're not sure whether that is mercy or politics. A town with quiet in its pockets. The tavern closes earlier now. Lamps appear in windows that used to be dark by 8. Dogs relearn the sound of their own paws. At first the quiet feels like a forgiveness. You can hear water tick in the pipes, the creak of a chair accepting your weight, the coin landing in your palm and staying there. You sit by the window after supper and listen to nothing with a gratitude that embarrasses you. Then bills arrive with unfamiliar impatience. Wages trimmed, hours uncertain, opportunity written in italics. The new line runs with half the hands and produces twice the cloth. The ledger begins to look like a miracle that forgot who performed it. You take odd work where you can, helping the print shop move its press, unloading a barge of grain, sharpening tools for men who now fix wires instead of wood. In every job you discover a pocket of quiet that someone used to fill. One night, you walk past the mill and put your ear to the brick. You hear a hum so faint it might be your own blood. You whisper, "Do you remember me?" A moth flutters from a crack. You try not to take it for an answer. The invention of silence. The phrase comes to you one dawn when even the birds seem reluctant. The invention of silence. As if quiet were a device, patented by progress for use when profit required fewer witnesses. But silence is older than wire. It lives in the pauses between bells, in the river's breath when the wind forgets its work, in the way a mother listens for a child's turning in the other room. The mills did not make it. They only taught you to fear it. You decide not to. You begin practicing a new craft, counting breaths instead of stitches, measuring light instead of hours, listening to your own pulse until it steadies into something that is yours. You discover that memory changes volume depending on how you hold it. In the museum it speaks through labels, in the ledger through numbers, in your hands through scars that feel almost like handwriting. The city learns this too, slowly, stubbornly. Markets reorganize. A school opens in a building that once stored bales. The river, filthy but unashamed, pushes past its own silt. One evening you sit on the old bridge and eat a heel of bread that tastes of peace more than flour. Across the water, the mill's windows glow with the smaller light of offices, rather than the old fire of labor. A clerk works late. You are not jealous of his quiet. You have made your own. A bell rings somewhere. Church, not factory, and the sound moves through you without command. You close your eyes and feel the gap where noise used to live. It is not emptiness, it is room. What survives you keep one thing from the old life. A length of thread, ordinary as weather. You wrap it around a nail in the wall and let it hang like a line of horizon. Some mornings it shakes when the wind walks through the room. You watch it sway and remember the long nights in the hall of looms. The hum you wore like a second skin. When friends visit, fewer now but better. They ask about the thread. You say it's a reminder of work. They ask of quiet. You say, they nod as if they understand. And perhaps they do, because understanding has become cheaper than it used to be. People can afford more of it when they are not being timed. You still dream of the mill sometimes, but the dreams arrive at a lower volume. The machines move like tide pools rather than storms. When you wake, your hands do not ache. They simply remember. You step outside. The air has edges again. Cool, kind, undecided. You breathe, and the breath is yours from start to finish. Reflection. There will be other engines, other towns, other names for the same hunger. The world loves a hum. It keeps inventing new throats for it. But you have learned to place a hand on the noise and feel for its pulse. If it beats with yours, you stay. If it drowns you, you step aside and let it pass. Some will say the age ended when wires replaced belts. You know it ended the day the bell forgot, when ritual surrendered to convenience, and the floor made room for a silence that did not hurt. You stand on the bridge at dusk. The river, an obedient sheet of metal beneath the sky. Clouds part. A lid of light slides across the water and stops under your feet. For the first time in years you can hear the old music beneath everything. Not the mill's memory, not the city's appetite, but the quieter song that was always here, patient as silt. You look toward the windows where you once survived the night and feel no accusation, only a complicated gratitude for the labor that fed you, for the machines that taught you attention, for the silence that returned and asked nothing in payment. You go home the long way, because there is time. The door resists as usual, then allows you through. On the table the thread waits. You tie a small knot in it, not to fasten anything useful, not to mend a tear, but to mark a place in the long story where the noise stepped back and you stepped forward. You blow out the candle. The room keeps breathing, and in the kind dark that follows, silence finally remembers you. The river remains. The mill has changed its voice. The city has changed its shape, but the river has stayed. Not still, not pure, but steady. It slides under the bridges, pretending not to notice how much the world leans on it. You lean too. When you rest your hand on the railing, the wood is damp. Beneath, the water folds over itself, brown-green and patient. It once carried barges of raw cotton, boats loaded with finished cloth, the ashes of burned timbers, after fires that no one wants to recall. Now it carries reflection, the slow shimmer of clouds, the silhouettes of chimneys that no longer smoke. The river doesn't remember in words, it remembers in stains. Each layer of silt, each twist of current, each oily sheen is a line in a ledger written without ink. You wonder if it forgives you. The water workers down by the bank, there's a small crew hired to clear the old channels. You watch them drag ropes across the surface, pulling up debris that once meant something. A rusted gear, half a barrel hoop, a tangle of thread turned to vine. They joke about finding treasure, though their laughter fades quickly into the wind. A boy holds up a fragment of machinery, asks what it was. An older man squints and says, "Something that worked too hard." He tosses it aside. The river swallows it without ceremony. You think of all the years you carried buckets of that same water into the mill, believing it to be endless. It was, in its own way, just not for you. Rivers last longer than jobs, longer than names, longer than even ambition. The bridge at dusk, you cross the old bridge every evening now. The boards sag in the middle. The iron bolts bloom with orange rust. Below, the river slides slow as breath. Children throw stones watching the ripples widen. Each circle expands, overlaps, vanishes. You think that's how memory works too. Nothing disappears, it just becomes too wide to see. On the far bank, the old mill windows reflect the sky. For years you saw smoke rising from them. Now you see light, quiet, ordinary light. Someone has turned the top floor into offices. In one window, a figure leans over a desk. The outline is familiar. Shoulders bent, head bowed, the universal shape of labor. Progress never changes posture. It only changes its tools. The river's new work. They say the river will power the town again, not through wheels or boilers, but through turbines sunk beneath the current. Clean energy, the newspapers call it. You smile at the phrase. The river was never dirty. Only what humans asked it to carry was. You walk along its edge, past new signs warning of slippery stone and restricted access. A metal fence guards what was once open bank. Behind it, the water churns through a gate, steady and obedient. It sounds almost the same as it used to, the same low roar softened by time. You crouch and dip a hand through the fence, letting the cold sting your skin. The river takes what warmth it wants and keeps moving. You whisper, "Still working, are you?" It doesn't answer, but a swirl of foam rises and drifts downstream as if nodding. The return of things. Some mornings after heavy rain, the current brings offerings. A wooden spool, pale and waterlogged. A shoe buckle dulled to grey, the corner of a ledger page. Words blurred but legible enough to read output. Steady, you keep one of the spools. You dry it on the windowsill until it smells of dust and sunlight. It sits beside the thread you saved, small tokens of a life that once felt infinite. Visitors ask if they're antiques. You shake your head. They're not old things. They're things that refuse to stay buried. The flood one winter. The river rises higher than it has in decades. Rain pours for days, turning alleys into streams, streams into lakes. People whisper that it's revenge, that the river has finally come to collect its debt. At night, you watch it from your window. The current glows under the street lamps, thick as mercury. The water presses against the mill's lower doors, trying them like locks it still owns the keys to. When morning comes, the flow recedes. Mud covers the yard, black and slick. The old bell tower leans slightly now as though listening. No one speaks of revenge again. They speak of repairs, of future safeguards, of progress that will prevent repetition. The river listens unimpressed. It has heard that tone before. What the river knows, it knows the taste of ash, the weight of iron, the chemistry of blood. It knows how sweat dissolves, how memory sinks, how cities rust. It has memorized the hum of wheels and the silence that followed. Sometimes, standing at its edge, you can feel it breathing, long, patient, indifferent. You think of all the hands that once cupped this same water, workers washing, children playing, owners blessing new builds with a gesture of sanctity that never quite fit. All gone now, all kept somewhere in its cold archive. The river does not distinguish between you and the machines. To it, both were temporary currents. The pilgrim one spring morning, a group of visitors arrives, students perhaps, or descendants of those who once worked here. They carry notebooks and cameras, speak softly as though entering a chapel. You follow them at a distance. Their guide points toward the river. This water powered half the industry of the valley. They nod reverently, snapping pictures of the current. None of them notice the faint rhythm in the sound, the echo of the old wheel turning somewhere beneath the surface. You hear it though. Once you've learned the language of machines, you can never forget it. The river hums in the same key. When they leave, you remain. You toss a pebble into the center of the stream. The ripples move outward, catching sunlight. For a moment, the water looks stitched, a pattern only you can read. Evening on the bank. At dusk, the river becomes mirror and memory both. Smoke from distant chimneys drifts across its face, blending with the first thin fog of evening. A heron stands motionless near the shallows, grey upon grey, patient as time itself. You sit on the old stone wall and eat a crust of bread, watching the light fade. Across the water, the mill's new tenants close their windows one by one. No lamps burn late anymore. The silence has grown confident. It doesn't need to prove itself. The air cools. You pull your coat tighter and whisper to the river again, not asking, just acknowledging. Its surface wrinkles catching a final glint of gold before settling back into dusk. Reflection: if the machines remembered the people, and the city remembered the machines, then the river remembers them all. Not as stories but as sediment. It holds no opinion, only continuity. You realize watching it move, that memory doesn't need monuments. It only needs motion. The water keeps what it must, and carries the rest away. Someday when you are gone, the river will still be here. It will slide under bridges that haven't been built yet, past towers that will call themselves modern, beside people who no longer know what a loom sounds like. It will remember for them too, whether they ask or not. You stand, brush crumbs from your coat, and begin the slow walk home. The air smells faintly of rain and old metal. Behind you the river murmurs, not to you but to itself. A sound between prayer and habit, the world's oldest working song. And you think quietly that maybe this is how survival truly sounds. Not loud, not heroic, just water, still moving, keeping what it must. You return on a morning that smells of iron and thaw. The path to the mill is half forgotten, paved with weeds that have learned to imitate cobblestone. Frost melts along the canal and the water carries thin sheets of ice that clink together like broken glassware. No bell rings, no smoke rises. The windows stare out empty and clean. You expected ruin, perhaps collapse, but the building endures in its own slow dignity. Time has scoured away the soot, left a paler version of itself. The air inside tastes like stone and rain. You pause at the threshold. The door hangs open just enough to make entry feel permitted. You step through, boots echoing in a room that once devoured sound. Inside the stillness. The floorboards are warped now, swollen from years of silence. You remember them trembling under the weight of 100 looms, each heartbeat synchronized to motion. Now they creak individually, shyly, as if embarrassed by their own voices. Light falls through high windows in slow golden shafts. Dust turns in it like snow that has nowhere left to land. You move through the space as one moves through memory, careful not to disturb the parts that still breathe. At the far wall stands a single survivor, a section of gear housing left behind. Perhaps too heavy to move, perhaps deliberately spared. You rest a hand on it. Cold, smooth, it feels less like metal and more like a pause. Ghost inventory. You open your notebook, the same one you used for wages long ago, and begin to count what remains. 1 empty hooks where belts once hung. 2 nails bent into the shape of fatigue. 3 names carved into the beam beside the west window. Ellie, Thomas, J. 4 a single brass button, oxidized to green. You write them down because that's what you were trained to do. Every line in the old ledger meant the world had been noticed. To write is to keep it from erasing itself. The columns of figures you once filled measured profit. These new ones measure endurance. Visitors of air and time. A pigeon clatters down from a rafter, startled by the motion of your pen. It circles once, settles again, resumes its indifferent prayer. A wind pushes through the open door, carrying the smell of wet leaves. It brushes the papers on your table, flips one over as if to sign it. You smile. The building is signing its name again. Somewhere behind the wall, water drips in rhythmic patience. The only sound that feels true. 5. The ledger of names. You open the last intact ledger left on the site. The paper has yellowed to the color of candle smoke. Ink has bled in places, but certain words remain sharp. Day 10. Output steady. Accidents minor. Weather fair. No mention of fatigue or hunger, or the songs hummed between the shuttles. Those columns were never meant for that kind of truth. You dip your finger in the dust and trace a new line beneath the old ones. Memory intact. The graphite leaves a faint grey mark. You close the book gently, as though it might bruise. The museum guard, a voice startles you. Sorry, we're not open yet. You turn, a young guard stands by the door. Uniform crisp, smile professional but kind. He assumes you're a curious visitor. Early for the tour. You nod, pocket the notebook. He says they're converting the upper floor into a textile heritage exhibit. Interactive displays, he calls them. He points upward, proud of the new lights that will hang where lamps once smoked the rafters. You thank him and ask if the river still floods. Not anymore, he says. They fixed the gates. You almost tell him the river was never broken. It was only patient, but you let it pass. He locks the door behind you when you leave. The click sounds too final to be trusted. Along the river again outside, the air brightens. Mist rises from the canal like memory escaping the page. You follow the curve of the water until the mill disappears behind the bend. Children fish with string and bent pins. Their laughter skips across the surface like thrown stones. The smell of bread drifts from the market quarter, a scent older than factories, older than industry, older even than ambition. You stop at the bridge. Beneath, the river still carries silt the color of old linen. You lean over the rail, see your reflection ripple and settle. For a moment it looks like two faces layered together, the worker you were and the witness you have become. The unwritten receipt. You think of everything you owe and everything that owed you. The balance never was even. But perhaps that was never the point. For every coin that vanished, there was a skill that stayed: how to endure heat, how to read silence, how to find rhythm where there should be none. Those were wages too, invisible but real. You reach into your pocket, pull out the spool you once saved. Its surface is cracked, the thread long gone. You roll it between your fingers like a prayer bead, then drop it into the water. It sinks without ceremony. The river will know what to do with it. Evening settlement. By the time you walk home, the day has folded into a gentle dusk. The streets glow with small, practical lamps. Windows open. Someone plays a violin off-key. A woman leans from a doorway, calling her children in. You pass unnoticed, which feels right. Survival was never about recognition. At your door the hinges protest as always. Inside, the air holds the smell of wool and soap. The thread on the wall trembles slightly in the draft. You sit, remove your shoes and let your body learn stillness again. For the first time it feels like a skill rather than a luxury. Closing the book, you open your notebook to the first page, where long ago you began with numbers. You cross through them carefully, line by line, until only the margins remain. Then, in the empty space, you write, "The mill is quiet. The city sleeps. The river keeps. We were here." You close the cover. It smells faintly of oil and rain. Outside, night gathers without hurry. You light a candle, not for work but for warmth. The flame steadies, hums softly, the smallest echo of the old rhythm, tamed now to peace. You breathe with it once, twice, then blow it out. The dark that follows is kind. History never ends. It only quiets. Somewhere, another wheel is already turning, another city learning to speak in iron. You cannot stop it, but you can listen more carefully this time. The machines taught endurance, the silence taught attention, the river taught mercy. That is enough learning for one life. You stretch your hand across the table, feel the wood grain under your palm, the same pattern you once traced on the loom. Different tool, same touch. Outside, the last bell of the day rings from the church across the water. Its sound travels through the night, without purpose, without command. It simply rings because it can. You smile. That, you think, is freedom. The ledger closes itself. The page remains warm. And somewhere in the dark, unseen but certain, the mill that never slept finally dreams.